Interrogation training at Aldershot, May 1971. This involved having a sack put over my head, being dragged into a compound, having my boots and socks removed, hands tied behind my back, and being made to lean with my forehead against a brick wall, being hit with a rifle butt whenever I moved. And in the background there was a continuous whining sound. Eventually dragged off, bare feet hitting stone steps, aware of passing through a number of corridors and doorways, until being unceremoniously bundled into a room with the door slammed behind me. After a moment's silence, a voice told me to stand up. The sack taken from my head. I was told to sit down. The thin man with the spectacles told me that he was from the Red Cross. He was here to help me, but he became impatient when I only volunteered name, rank and number, and he told me that the Red Cross would not help me. The guard took me back to the wall for another period of discomfort. In the second room was the bully, who proceeded to verbally abuse me. I managed to ignore all the repetition and slander by thinking about, of all things, a complicated demand and supply graph which we have been studying in economics at the Polytechnic. He dismissed me with a wry smile. I'd be really ashamed if I had a son like you. Again the wall, and then the last interrogation cell with the nice one. This experience was pretty safe, and one knew that it would not last forever. Quite different from the real thing, and also quite different from some of the interrogations that apparently occurred on exercises. Stories of being tied to the floor of a 3-tonner, driven over rough ground, or being made to stand naked in a cold stream all night. Further training in 1971. 2 weeks of signals training at Hereford, learning how to send and receive Morse code, gradually increasing our speeds. Exercise Young Boss, in which the newer members of the squadron, like Mick Jordan and me, led patrols. It began and ended with a boat journey along the River Hamble. In Aldershot, wearing nuclear warfare suits, we practiced building and observing from underground shelters. (1971) Making our way through the canal system around Birmingham, as Spaghetti Junction was being constructed around us. At one point, workmen cleared the way for us and kindly craned our boat over an obstacle in the canal. Outward Bound, August 1971. The SEB sponsored me to go on a 3-week outward bound course at Ullswater in the Lake District. 12 of us became the Oats Group, and soon we were involved in intensive circuit training in the forest, followed by a cross-country run in which the entire school took part. I discovered how fit I was when I became second. Our days began with a verbal alarm at 5 a.m. and a run down to the lake where we jumped in off the pier. One of the earliest exercises involved our group in rowing across the lake in a boat with 12 oars, walking into the hills and building individual bivvies for the night. I was voted captain of the group. The warden of the centre stated early on his dislike of beards. I had just begun to grow one, but later on showed us a film of an expedition in which he had taken part, and lo and behold, he had a beard. As well as rock climbing and abseiling, we also learnt canoeing techniques such as the Eskimo roll. Then we went on a canoeing expedition down Bassenthwaite Lake, along the river and into Derwent Water. For the final expedition we were put into groups of 4. Our expedition involved a circuit of Ullswater between Pooley Bridge and Stickle Tarn. On the last evening we put on a concert with the usual sketches, songs and imitations of staff members. Two weeks in Germany, September 1971. 21 SAS's role in the event of war was one of patrols being airlifted into Germany, where they would be driven to given locations to build underground observation stations, and wearing nuclear warfare suits wait for the bombs which would devastate the area. These patrols were then to report back to headquarters the movements of the Russian war machine as it passed overhead. That was the extent of our role, and presumably death would have followed as radiation seeped into our shelters and food and water, and eventually through our suits. Anyway, here we were in Germany on a NATO exercise to practice this. Driven to the set location in a forest, we proceeded to dig out an L-shaped hole, to place the Anderson shelter pieces in it, and then fill it in and disguise the surface as if nothing was there. The patrol leader and signaller were established on one side of the L, and the assistant signaller and I in the other half. I was positioned near the door as observer, next to the Elson, which thankfully no one used. Instead, we would emerge from the shelter when no one was around and go behind a bush. I remember the amazing roar when the war machine did start coming in our direction. It was pitch black when I took my binoculars and chart of silhouettes of military vehicles up to the entrance, and noted with tally marks the numbers of each type, then passing the results down to the signaller every so often. This proved to be quite an intensive 2 hours. Later we heard that the reporting back had been very accurate. The next day we received an order to abandon the shelter and make our way to headquarters for further instructions. We set off in the night, and after a few hours noticed some headlights on the road ahead. While the rest of us hid in the ditch, the patrol leader waved the Land Rover down. When it stopped, we all sprang out and hijacked the vehicle, leaving the driver and officer with gaping mouths on the roadside. Inside the Land Rover we discovered the entire plans for the enemy's campaign. We had captured a command Land Rover. We signalled through to headquarters and then drove the rest of the way there. We received a mixed response. Some were overjoyed that we had compromised the enemy plans. Others that this might spoil the entire NATO exercise. In 1970, Grandma Lillian died. Grandpa Henry made several visits to the First World War battlefield sites. Denmark, November 1971. This exercise began with a preparation weekend in South Wales. I arrived at Hereford late on the Friday and overslept, thus missing the transport, so I asked the pilot of the exercise helicopter for a lift to South Wales. This was, however, not possible, but a sergeant major of the 22nd SAS took me in his Land Rover. The weekend comprised practice in sending flashlight signals to helicopter pilots who were dropping equipment, and also parachute jumps from helicopters, which involved remaining seated on the floor and sliding out feet first. The following weekend we were on our way to Denmark. Our 6-man patrol was compromised, and so we all scattered. The signaller and I ran down the same ditch and waited, but lost track of the others. We studied the map and decided that we could still do something. We hatched a plan whereby we would take explosives into the docks at Copenhagen and onto a ship there. We had the radio, and so sent a signal to that effect, asking for a Bergen full of explosive to be left at a designated location. Soon the question of food arose. We shared some chocolate that I had in my escape belt. And then in a field we discovered swedes, which we cut into cubes to last over the next 2 days. Throughout the night we tried to make our way to the cache of explosives. However, the local militia, made up of very professional local farmers, had created an impenetrable wall. Every way we tried to get through, someone was there. "Halt, who goes there?" And we had to disappear fast into the undergrowth as we were being shot at. They had a technique of driving along, switching off headlights and coasting further on, so we could not tell where they were. In the end we gave up and decided to make our way to the final rendezvous. In the evening we followed a railway track for several miles and then walked cross-country through the night, arriving at a pig farm in the early hours. So as to avoid interrogation we waited until 7 a.m, when the exercise was due to end, and knocked on the farm door. The farmer spoke perfect English and invited us to go into the pig sheds and get warm. Back in Copenhagen, a trip had been organised to a strip club. We bundled in and the show began. First with a pornographic version of the cartoon Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then a girl stripping to music. She then joined a man and they attempted to have sexual intercourse, but had to abandon the idea as the cheering was putting him off. It was an interesting and at times amusing experience, although rather seedy, and I had no desire to repeat it. Then we all boarded the transport to the airport. I noticed that the seat next to the driver was empty, and so opened the cab and asked if I could sit there. He nodded, and so I had a comfortable ride to the plane for the homeward journey. forever grateful to the guys in the SAS. During those 2 very intense years, they pulled me out of the mire in so many ways. A motorbike, crisps and more music. I purchased a Honda 175 motorbike, which was great fun in the summer but freezing in the winter. Although I did have an income from the SEB and the SAS, I did run out of cash and so worked nights at Smith's Crisps for a few weeks and vowed never to touch a crisp again. I put together a trio, bass, drums and guitar, and we called ourselves the CJs, and played some classics and self-penned numbers. Also co-wrote comedy songs with Stephen and John, with whom I shared digs. The concert party. This all led to the formation of a concert party with these guys and a wider group of friends who produced comedy sketches and sang as a folk group. After cutting our teeth on 2 shows at an adult centre, I arranged for us to perform for the inmates of Portsmouth's maximum security prison. It was a wonderful experience, and we were so well received. In the summer of 1992, I left Mrs. Smith's home and made my way to the Isle of Arran, where I had arranged to join forest school camps as a leader. On the train heading north, and again on the boat crossing the Firth of Clyde, I met a young lady named Janet, who at first I thought was a pathfinder.